What would you do if the person you loved the most asked you to take their place, even after they're gone? It was a question that Emily had never imagined she'd have to answer. Standing in the dimly lit living room of her sister's mansion, staring at the man who had once been Olivia's fiancé, Emily felt the weight of the world crash down on her. Emily. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Alexander Blackwell's deep voice broke through the haze of shock that clouded her mind. His icy blue eyes, usually so calm and composed, were frantic now, desperate, even. The room felt colder, the air thick with tension. It was as if time had come to a screeching halt. She wasn't prepared for this. No one could have prepared her. I know this is hard, Alexander continued, running a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair, his voice faltering. But Olivia is gone. I don't know how else to say it. He paused, his gaze unwavering. I want you to marry me. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The words echoed in her mind, each one ringing louder than the last. Marry me? How could he be asking this? How could he even think of her as Olivia, after everything that had happened? Olivia is dead, Emily whispered, as if stating the obvious would somehow make sense of the madness in front of her. You want me to take her place? Her voice shook, but she couldn't stop it. Take her place. Alexander's face softened for a brief moment, and he stepped closer, the sadness in his expression evident. You look just like her. You are her twin, Emily. No one needs to know the difference. You can still give me the life we were supposed to have together. She felt the floor beneath her feet tilt as if the room had spun. Her sister, Olivia, the vivacious, headstrong woman who had lived life on her terms, she was gone. Gone forever. A car accident had claimed her life just 2 weeks ago, leaving nothing behind but memories, an empty space, and now. This impossible request. Emily's head swam. This couldn't be real. This can't be happening. Alexander, she began, trying to form coherent thoughts, but words refused to come. She wanted to scream, to shout that he was out of his mind, that he couldn't possibly expect this from her. But instead, she found herself staring at him, rooted to the spot, torn between grief and confusion. I need you, Emily. Alexander's voice was almost a plea now, his face drawn with pain. I don't care about the rest of the world. I care about you. I need you to pretend to be Olivia for just a little longer. No one will ever have to know the difference. I'll take care of everything. Pretend to be Olivia. The words reverberated in her ears. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. How could she even consider this? How could she possibly live her life as someone else, let alone marry a man who was so deeply in love with her twin sister? It felt like a betrayal. A betrayal of Olivia's memory. A betrayal of herself. But then there was the matter of her own life. Emily had never been the bold twin. She had always played second fiddle to Olivia's charisma, her success, her daring adventures. While Olivia had swept through life effortlessly, Emily had faded into the background, unsure of who she was and where she belonged. In a way, Olivia had always been her protector, her guide. When Olivia died, it was like the foundation beneath her crumbled away. Her life, it seemed, had no direction anymore. Now here was Alexander, offering her an escape from the depths of her grief. A life that could be her own, or at least, a life that could look like Olivia's. The mansion. The wealth. The attention. The world at her feet. It was tempting. But at what cost? I can't just become Olivia, Emily managed to say, her voice breaking as she tried to stand firm. She's gone. I'm not her. I know, Emily. Alexander's voice softened, and for a moment, his usual cool demeanor cracked. But you can give me what I lost. You can help me heal. And I will make sure you have everything you've ever wanted. The words hung in the air, an unspoken promise. What Alexander was asking of her was more than just a marriage, it was a chance at a new life. A chance to step into the shoes of someone she loved, someone who had been taken from her too soon. A chance to be part of a world that she'd only ever seen from the sidelines. But could she live with herself if she did it? Could she betray Olivia's memory, the woman who had always been there for her, to play the part of a woman who no longer existed? Emily stepped back, her hand gripping the back of a nearby chair for support. "This is insane," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're asking me to be someone I'm not." "I'm asking you to be with me, Emily," Alexander said, his eyes earnest and full of longing. "You're the only one who can help me get through this. I need you." Olivia would have wanted it this way. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Olivia would have wanted it this way. Would she? Emily tried to picture her twin sister, her laughter, her warmth, her kindness. Would Olivia have ever wanted her to take her place in a world she no longer belonged to? Would Olivia have wanted Emily to deceive everyone, to erase her own identity in favor of a life that wasn't hers? It felt wrong. All of it felt wrong. Yet, the silence in the room pressed in on her. The longer she stood there, the more she felt the pull of Alexander's words, of the life she could have if she said yes. She could finally be someone. She could be someone important. But at what cost? She closed her eyes, trying to push aside the noise in her head, the doubts, the guilt, the overwhelming sadness. 1,000 emotions raged within her, but one thing was clear, this was a decision she couldn't take lightly. Finally, she opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I need time to think." Alexander didn't protest. He simply nodded, his face a mixture of hope and fear. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, whenever you're ready." But as he turned to leave, a heavy weight settled on Emily's chest. Time didn't change the truth. No matter what she decided, she was about to step into a world that could destroy everything she had left of Olivia, of herself. Her heart beat faster. And somewhere deep inside, Emily knew that once she made this choice, there would be no turning back. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emily had always lived in the shadow of her twin sister, Olivia. It wasn't that she minded, really. She was content with being the quiet one, the more reserved twin, while Olivia took center stage. Olivia was the life of every party, the one who never hesitated to speak her mind, who could charm anyone with a smile and a wink. Olivia's world was full of excitement and adventure, and Emily was happy to let her take the lead. But what had never occurred to Emily was just how much of herself she'd lost along the way. How much of her own life she'd hidden in the quiet corners while Olivia played the starring role. When Olivia died, it felt like the world had come crashing down around her. The life Emily had known, the life she'd grown so comfortable with, had come to an abrupt end. There had been no warning, no time to prepare. It had been a car accident. A split-second decision. A twist of fate that took Olivia from the world, and left Emily with nothing but a hollow, aching emptiness where her twin sister had once been. The grief was suffocating. At first, it had been the shock, the numbness of not fully understanding what had happened. The funeral was a blur of faces and words that didn't quite make sense. Everyone had cried. Everyone had offered their condolences. But no one could truly understand the depth of Emily's loss. No one could understand what it was like to lose a part of yourself. Her parents had retreated into their grief, unable to console her or even themselves. It was as if the family had split in two, with each of them left to handle their pain in isolation. But it was the loss of Olivia that had carved the deepest wound. Everywhere she looked, Emily was reminded of her sister. Olivia's favorite book still sat on the shelf, untouched. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Even the smell of her perfume lingered in the air, a constant reminder of the vibrant, full-of-life woman who had once been at the center of everything. Emily had tried to go back to her usual routine. Work, friends, family, but it was impossible. Nothing felt right anymore. How could she go back to living the same life when a piece of her soul was gone? Every night, she found herself lying awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling like she was drifting through life without a purpose. She no longer knew who she was without Olivia. She had spent so many years defining herself in relation to her twin that now, without Olivia, she was adrift, alone in a world that no longer made sense. The apartment that had once been their shared space now felt empty. She found herself wandering through rooms, touching things that belonged to Olivia, trying to connect with the person who was no longer there. But every touch, every object, only reminded her of the void left in her heart. In the weeks after Olivia's death, Emily had kept to herself, avoiding social gatherings and keeping the world at arm's length. But then came the knock on the door, the meeting with Alexander. At first, Emily hadn't known how to respond to his request. She'd been confused, overwhelmed, and emotionally fragile. Alexander Blackwell was no stranger to her. In fact, he had been a part of her and Olivia's life for as long as she could remember. He was a billionaire businessman, successful, charismatic, and incredibly charming. When she'd first met him years ago, she had been struck by his magnetism. But even then, she knew he was in love with Olivia. It wasn't that Emily lacked charm or beauty, she was, in many ways, the quieter, more introverted version of her twin. But Olivia had always had a way of drawing people to her, and Alexander had been no exception. Emily had never imagined that Alexander would look at her the way he had looked at Olivia. But now, standing before her, he had made it clear. He wasn't asking for a replacement for Olivia, he was asking her to become Olivia. He was asking her to step into her twin's life. And for a brief moment, Emily had considered it. The idea was absurd, but it was also strangely alluring. She had no direction. She had no clear purpose. Taking Olivia's place in the world might give her something to hold on to, something to give her life meaning again. It was tempting, the promise of a life full of glamour, wealth, and power, the kind of life she'd never had. But then, the guilt hit her. She couldn't do that to Olivia. She couldn't betray her sister's memory by pretending to be someone she wasn't. It felt wrong, like an intrusion. Olivia deserved to be remembered for who she was, not erased and replaced by a ghost. And yet, there was a nagging thought in the back of Emily's mind: what would Olivia have wanted? The idea of pretending to be Olivia gnawed at her. It was a betrayal of everything she had held dear, but it also felt like a lifeline, a chance to escape the crushing grief that had defined her life since Olivia's death. The more Emily thought about it, the more confused she became. She didn't know what Olivia would have wanted. She didn't even know what she herself wanted anymore. But then, Alexander had said something that struck her. He had looked at her with such raw emotion, as if he truly believed that she could be the one to heal the wounds left by Olivia's death. He had said he needed her. Needed her to be his wife. Needed her to be Olivia. And in that moment, the loneliness inside her swelled, as if he were offering her a chance to finally belong to someone. What was she supposed to do with that? Over the next few days, Emily couldn't shake the thought of Alexander's proposition. She replayed their conversation in her mind over and over again, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out what she should do. In the quiet moments, when she was alone in the apartment, she could almost hear Olivia's voice in her head, as if her sister was still with her, guiding her through the storm. Olivia had always been the strong one, the one who knew exactly what to do. But now, Emily was alone in the silence, with no clear path forward. Her decision would have to come soon. Alexander was waiting, and the offer he had extended wasn't something that could be taken lightly. Could she really take on Olivia's life, knowing the consequences? Could she live with herself if she did? One thing was certain, Emily was no longer the same person she had been before Olivia's death. She was someone else now, someone uncertain, someone lost, and the choices she made in the coming days would shape the rest of her life. The days blurred together for Emily. It had only been 3 weeks since Olivia's death, but in some ways, it felt like a lifetime. The grief was still fresh, a gnawing, constant ache that refused to fade. But what was even harder than the grief itself was the quiet, the suffocating silence that came with living without Olivia. Emily wandered through the mansion, once shared by her twin and Alexander, feeling out of place. Everything here, every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall, seemed like a reminder of the life that had been. She couldn't bring herself to pack up Olivia's things. Couldn't bear to part with the memories of her sister, who had been so full of life, so full of promises. Now those promises were gone, like vapor in the air. She tried to ignore the nagging thoughts, the whispers of Alexander's words from that day. "I need you, Emily. You're the only one who can help me. You can give me what I lost. Marry me. Be her." The invitation, the plea, was stuck in her mind like a broken record. How could she even think about accepting his proposition? How could she live her life pretending to be Olivia? Was that even possible? Could she keep the illusion going long enough to appease Alexander, to fulfill the role he needed her to play? And yet, the weight of loneliness hung heavily on her heart. There was nothing in Emily's life now. No direction. No purpose. Everything seemed so empty, so hollow, without Olivia. She could feel the deep, suffocating pull of Alexander's words. He was offering her something she hadn't realized she needed: purpose, stability, even love. It was a bizarre comfort, a twisted way of getting back to normal, or at least, as close as she could get. Alexander, with his cold yet desperate need, had created an opportunity for her to escape the misery of her own life, to slip into a different skin. But was it enough? Could she do this? Could she take on the role of a woman who wasn't her? Could she really marry the man Olivia had once loved? The idea of taking Olivia's place, it had seemed impossible at first, but now it didn't feel so foreign. The more Emily thought about it, the more she realized how much of Olivia she had been carrying with her. Their bond was undeniable, after all. They had shared everything, from childhood dreams to the secrets of their hearts. If anyone could understand what Olivia would have wanted, it was Emily. Yet there was a constant tug in her chest, a warning that this wasn't right. She wasn't Olivia. She couldn't pretend to be her forever. But what was she supposed to do? Alexander was waiting. He was offering her the world, a life of luxury, a future that could look so much like the one Olivia had been destined for. Still, the idea of walking down the aisle as someone else felt like an unbearable weight. It wasn't just a dress she would wear, a ring on her finger, it was her identity, her very soul, that she would be swapping. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch out, wrapping around her, keeping her awake. The quiet of the house pressed down on her. She had tried to bury her thoughts, to push them aside, but now they came flooding back, more intense than ever. She knew she had to make a decision. She couldn't continue like this, caught between grief and guilt, between the promise of a new life and the loyalty to the sister she had lost. But how could she decide what to do? She couldn't afford to live in limbo, pretending to be unsure while Alexander waited for her answer. In the dead of night, Emily picked up the phone. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she hesitated. Should she call Alexander? Should she tell him she was ready to take the next step? Or should she keep her distance, hold on to the little bit of herself that was still Emily, no one else? With trembling hands, Emily dialed Alexander's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, before he picked up. Emily. His voice sounded different now. Softer, more patient. Have you made a decision? Her heart skipped. There was no turning back now. She swallowed, trying to find the right words. I don't know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to understand what this would really mean. What exactly do you expect from me, Alexander? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a quiet desperation. I expect you to be with me, Emily. I expect you to help me heal. To be the woman I love. To give me the life I lost with Olivia. He sounded so sure, so certain of his words, that it made her chest tighten. I can't be her, Emily said, her voice breaking. I'm not Olivia. I'm not her, and I can't just step into her life like that. I don't want you to be Olivia, Emily, Alexander said softly, a tone of sadness in his voice. I want you to be with me, as yourself. But you look like her. You have her heart. And that's all I need. I want to build a life with you. You and me. Together. Her breath caught in her throat. He wasn't asking her to be a copy of Olivia. He was asking her to be herself in a life she never could have imagined. But was she strong enough to take that step? Was she willing to erase her own identity, to step into the world Olivia had occupied, and pretend to be something she wasn't? I don't know if I can, she said quietly, her hands shaking as she held the phone to her ear. I understand, Alexander replied, his voice gentle. Take your time. I'm here when you're ready. I just don't want to lose you. As he hung up, Emily sat there in the darkness of her room, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She could almost feel Olivia's presence beside her, as if her twin sister was right there, whispering in her ear. What would you want me to do, Olivia? Emily wondered, staring at the moonlight filtering through the window. But there was no answer. No comforting voice to guide her. Just the heavy silence. The decision weighed heavily on Emily's heart for the next few days. She spent hours wandering the halls of Olivia's mansion, the house she had once shared with Alexander. It had been a place of laughter and love, and now it felt like a tomb, cold and empty. Every corner seemed to echo with memories of Olivia, her vibrant energy, her laughter, her scent, her presence. Emily found it almost unbearable. But at the same time, it was all she had left. The idea of stepping into Olivia's shoes, of becoming the woman Alexander had loved, was both horrifying and oddly comforting. Could she really do it? Could she truly pretend to be someone else? What if the lie became too much to handle? What if she lost herself completely in the process? Yet, at the same time, the prospect of living a life so foreign, so lavish, so full of promise, called to her in a way that nothing else had. She had no clear answer. All she had was the crushing silence of the mansion and the constant reminder that Olivia would never walk through that door again. But then, a knock at the door pulled Emily from her spiraling thoughts. She glanced up at the clock, late afternoon. Who could be visiting at this hour? She hesitated for a moment before walking toward the door. When she opened it, she found Alexander standing there, his face calm but his eyes full of an unspoken intensity. He was impeccably dressed, as always, in a tailored suit that made him look both sophisticated and intimidating. I thought I'd come by and see how you were doing, he said softly, his voice just above a whisper. It's been a few days since we spoke. Have you made a decision? Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had been preparing herself for this moment, but now that it had arrived, she felt completely unprepared. She took a step back, letting him in, her mind racing as her heart thudded in her chest. I've been thinking, Emily began, closing the door behind him. I don't know if I can do this, Alexander. I don't know if I can be her. He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. You don't have to be her, Emily, he said gently. You just have to be with me. You just have to be my partner. I need you. I need someone who understands what I've lost. Someone who understands how much I still love Olivia. Emily's mind whirled. She didn't know if she could carry the weight of that love, the expectation that she would somehow replace Olivia. She wasn't sure she even wanted to. The more she thought about it, the more it seemed like an impossible task. The woman he loved was gone, and no matter how much she resembled her, Emily couldn't fill that void. But then there was the question that kept haunting her: what else did I have? Her life, her future, none of it seemed real anymore. She couldn't go back to the old, empty existence she had before. She needed a new path. And Alexander, for all his flaws, was offering her a chance at something else. A chance to step into a life of power, security, and perhaps even love. "I'm not sure if I can be what you need me to be," Emily said, her voice breaking. "But I don't know what else to do. I don't have anywhere else to go." Alexander's face softened, his eyes filled with something like understanding. "I'm not asking you to replace her," he said again, his voice firm. "I'm asking you to be the woman you are, your own person, with your own dreams, your own desires. But you've lived in her shadow your whole life. I just want you to let me in. Let me help you heal, like I'm trying to heal. Together." The words resonated with Emily, pulling at something deep inside of her. She didn't want to be trapped in the past, constantly looking over her shoulder at the ghost of Olivia. But was she strong enough to step into the unknown? Could she really build a future with Alexander when everything about it felt like a lie? Still, a part of her wanted to believe. A part of her wanted to escape the overwhelming sadness, the constant reminder that Olivia would never return. "I need time," Emily said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I need time to think about it." Alexander nodded, stepping back a little. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But know this, Emily, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And I'll wait for you." With that, he turned and left, leaving Emily standing there in the silent house, her heart racing. For the next few days, Emily remained in the house, alone with her thoughts. She couldn't escape the whirlwind inside her head, the question of whether she could accept Alexander's offer, or if it would destroy her in the end. She spent her time searching for some sense of purpose in the midst of the emptiness. She visited places she and Olivia had gone together, cafes, parks, even the old bookstore where they had spent hours reading side by side. Everything reminded her of the life she had once shared with her sister, a life that was now out of reach. One afternoon, as Emily sat on a bench in the park, a woman approached her. She was in her late 30s, with warm brown eyes and an inviting smile. Emily recognized her immediately. It was Lily, an old friend of Olivia's from college. "Emily?" Lily's voice was tentative, like she wasn't sure if she should even approach. But when she saw Emily's face, she seemed to make up her mind. "It's me, Lily. I'm so sorry about Olivia. I've been thinking about you a lot. How are you holding up?" The question caught Emily off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked her that. "How are you holding up?" She swallowed the lump in her throat, trying to force the words out. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I don't know what to do anymore." Lily sat down beside her, her presence comforting. "I can't pretend to know what you're going through, but I do know that you shouldn't make any decisions based on guilt or fear. Whatever you choose to do, you need to do it for yourself. Not for anyone else." Her words were like a lifeline, a voice of reason in the storm of Emily's thoughts. She had been so focused on what Alexander wanted, on the pressure of stepping into Olivia's life, that she had forgotten to consider what she wanted. "I don't know what I want," Emily admitted. "But I do know I'm not ready to live someone else's life. I can't just pretend to be Olivia." Lily nodded, her gaze soft and understanding. "You don't have to pretend, Emily. You just have to find your own way forward. Olivia wouldn't want you to lose yourself trying to be someone else." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe she didn't have to give up who she was to move forward. Maybe there was a way to rebuild her life without replacing Olivia. As Emily stood up to leave, a sense of clarity began to settle over her. She still didn't have all the answers, but Lily's words had given her something important to hold on to, the idea that she could move forward without erasing the past. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to build a future that was entirely her own. The next morning, the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if the oppressive weight of grief and uncertainty had been lifted, even just a little. Emily had been lying awake most of the night, her mind swirling with thoughts of Alexander, Olivia, and what she was truly capable of. Lily's words, "You don't have to pretend, Emily. You just have to find your own way forward," kept echoing in her mind. She had never realized how much she had been living in Olivia's shadow. The truth was, Emily hadn't really known who she was without her twin, and that realization was both liberating and terrifying. She had spent so much of her life being Olivia's twin, the person who was always there, always the second half of something bigger. But now, with Olivia gone, the space she had left was an empty chasm, one that Emily wasn't sure how to fill. As the morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a soft golden glow over the room, Emily stood up, took a deep breath, and went to the large mirror in Olivia's bedroom. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman with familiar features, but a stranger's eyes. She had always seen herself in the context of her sister, but today, for the first time in years, Emily tried to see herself. The decision she had been avoiding loomed before her. Should she give in to Alexander's plea and marry him, playing the role of Olivia, or should she walk away from the life Olivia had left behind and find her own path? The two options seemed so vastly different, and yet, in a way, they both promised a future, one rooted in the past and the other in the unknown. But what if she didn't want either? Emily knew she couldn't keep living in the past, haunted by the ghost of a life that was no longer hers to live. It wasn't just about Alexander or the mansion, it was about her own identity, her own future. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain, she couldn't continue pretending. Taking a deep breath, Emily turned from the mirror and walked downstairs. She had to make a decision. It wasn't fair to anyone, especially to Alexander, to drag this on any longer. When she reached the main living room, she saw that Alexander was sitting on the couch, waiting for her. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes betrayed a mixture of anticipation and hope. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Emily," he said softly, his gaze fixed on her. "I know you've been thinking about what we discussed. Have you come to a decision?" She hesitated for a moment, gathering the courage to speak. This was it, the moment she had been avoiding for days. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, her voice steady but unsure. "And about what I want. But I've come to realize something, Alexander. I can't do this. I can't pretend to be Olivia. I can't step into her life and replace her. I'm not her. I'm me, and I need to find out who that is." His face fell, a flicker of disappointment crossing his features before he masked it with a neutral expression. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure," she said, her voice firm, though her heart clenched at the thought of disappointing him. "I know that I can't give you what you're asking for. I can't be her. And I don't think I should try to be." There was a long silence between them, and for a moment, Emily wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But then, Alexander spoke. "I understand," he said, his voice quieter than usual, almost resigned. "I knew you'd need time. I'm not angry with you, Emily. I understand that this is a lot to ask. I wanted you to know that I wasn't just looking for someone to replace her. I wanted you, in your own way. But I see now that this was never about finding someone to fill the void. It was about finding someone who could understand me, someone I could share my life with." His words softened the sting of the decision, and Emily felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way for them both to move on, to heal, in their own ways. "I don't know what the future holds," she continued. "But I do know that I need to figure it out on my own. I'm not ready to marry you, and I don't think I ever will be. Not as Olivia, and not as anyone else." Alexander stood up, slowly, his expression pensive. For a moment, it seemed like he was about to argue or convince her otherwise, but then he simply nodded, his face softening. "I can't say I'm happy about this. But I respect your decision. Thank you, Emily replied, her voice full of quiet sincerity. I hope we can both find our way. With that, there was nothing left to say. They both stood there in silence, the weight of the moment hanging between them. And then, to Emily's surprise, Alexander walked over to her and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You don't have to walk this path alone, Emily, he said. I don't expect you to forget Olivia or the past. But if you need time to find yourself, I'll give it to you. Just know that I'll always be here if you change your mind. No matter what, you'll always have a place with me. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt a sense of relief. She didn't have to be someone else. She didn't have to live a life that wasn't hers. She could take the time she needed to find herself again, to rebuild, and to move forward without the shadow of Olivia hanging over her. Later that afternoon, Emily decided to take a walk outside, her mind still processing everything that had happened. As she stepped out onto the grounds of the mansion, she felt the cool breeze on her face, the warmth of the sun on her skin. She hadn't realized how much she had needed this moment of stillness. Walking through the garden, she noticed the wildflowers that Olivia had once tended to, their bright colors now a reminder of the sister she had loved. She knelt down, running her fingers through the petals, feeling a small sense of peace settle in her heart. For the first time in weeks, Emily didn't feel like she was running away from something. She wasn't trying to outrun her grief, or the expectations others had placed on her. She was simply being. She was just herself, standing in the sunlight. And as she looked around the garden, a realization struck her. Olivia had been her anchor, but now it was time for Emily to find her own. The days that followed Emily's conversation with Alexander were some of the most challenging of her life. There was an odd sense of liberation in the air, but it was paired with a lingering fear of the unknown. Without the heavy weight of pretending to be someone else, she was free, but free to do what, exactly? For so long, her life had revolved around Olivia, her twin, her companion. Now, without that anchor, Emily felt untethered, as if she were floating in a sea of possibilities, all of them both thrilling and terrifying. The first week after her decision was filled with long, sleepless nights and restless mornings. She spent her days wandering the mansion, trying to rediscover what had been lost in the wake of her sister's death. It wasn't just the loss of Olivia herself, but the loss of the life they had shared, the routines, the habits, the way their lives had been so intertwined. The mansion, once filled with laughter and shared moments, now seemed vast and empty. Emily spent time in the library, flipping through the books Olivia had once loved, hoping to find a trace of her presence. She sat in the garden, where they had spent so many summer afternoons, but all she found was the silence. There were moments of peace, but those moments were always interrupted by a sharp pang of longing. She missed Olivia more than words could express. But the longer Emily stayed in the mansion, the more she realized that it wasn't just the house that felt empty, it was her own life. She had allowed herself to be defined by her connection to Olivia, and now that Olivia was gone, she felt as though she were nothing. What had she been doing with her own life? What dreams did she have, if any? And who was she, really? One morning, as she sat in the kitchen, sipping her coffee and staring out the window at the sprawling grounds, she heard the sound of a knock at the door. It was a gentle knock, polite, but persistent. Emily hesitated for a moment before getting up to answer it. She had been avoiding visitors, not wanting to deal with the awkwardness of explaining her decision. But curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the door. Standing there, looking somewhat out of place in her business attire, was Lily. Her warm brown eyes softened when she saw Emily, as if she had been expecting to find her in a fragile state. "Hey," Lily greeted her, a small smile on her face. "I thought I'd stop by. We didn't really get a chance to talk the other day." Emily gave a small, tired smile in return. "I'm glad you came. Come in." She stepped aside to let Lily enter, grateful for the distraction. The weight of isolation had been starting to take its toll on her, and seeing a familiar face was a welcome change. Lily stepped inside and looked around the house, her expression thoughtful. You know, it's strange being here without Olivia. It feels like something's missing. But I'm glad to see you. I don't know how to feel, Emily admitted, her voice strained. She motioned for Lily to sit at the kitchen table, then took a seat across from her. I thought I'd feel more, something, after everything with Alexander. But I don't. I'm just, lost, I guess. Lily nodded understandingly, her gaze kind and patient. I can't imagine how hard this must be. You've had so much change in such a short time. But you're not alone, Emily. You don't have to figure this all out by yourself. I don't know where to even begin, Emily confessed, her shoulders slumping in exhaustion. I don't even know who I am anymore without Olivia. Lily's eyes softened. You're not Olivia. I know it might feel that way right now, like you've lost your identity, but you are Emily. And that's enough. You don't need to live in the shadow of her memory to be worthy of love and success. You just need to find your own path. Emily bit her lip, feeling a tear prick at the corner of her eye. I don't know how to do that. I've spent so many years being Olivia's twin, I don't even know where to start. Lily reached across the table, placing a hand gently on Emily's. I know it's scary. I know it feels impossible. But you will figure it out. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take it one step at a time. Maybe that's the only way to get through something like this. Emily nodded slowly, feeling a strange sense of comfort from Lily's words. For the first time in days, she felt like someone understood her struggle. Lily had always been there for Olivia, but in that moment, she was there for Emily. You're right, Emily said, wiping the tear away. I don't have to have all the answers. I just need to start living for myself again. Lily smiled warmly. Exactly. And I think that's the hardest part. You're used to thinking about what everyone else needs, but now it's time to think about you. It might be small steps, but each one will bring you closer to yourself. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't sure what her next step would be, or what the future held, but she knew that she couldn't keep waiting for answers. She needed to live again, even if she didn't know what that looked like yet. Over the next few days, Emily made small changes. She started to leave the mansion more often, taking long walks through the nearby town and spending time in local cafes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She was learning to make decisions based on her own needs, not Olivia's or Alexander's. She was rediscovering parts of herself she had long ignored. One afternoon, as she walked through the town square, she passed a small art gallery. On a whim, she decided to step inside. The gallery was quiet, the air filled with the scent of fresh paint and aged wood. As she wandered among the paintings, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The colors, the brushstrokes, each piece of art felt like a piece of someone's soul laid bare. It was raw, unfiltered, and beautiful. Emily was so absorbed in the artwork that she didn't notice the woman who was standing nearby, observing her. The woman was in her mid-40s, with short silver hair and an air of quiet confidence. She was the gallery owner, Emily learned after a brief exchange. I don't think I've seen you around here before, the woman said, her voice warm. You like the paintings? Emily nodded, turning to face her. I've always loved art, but I never really did anything with it. I've spent so much of my life trying to please others, I didn't think about what I actually wanted. The woman smiled knowingly. It's easy to get caught up in other people's expectations. But the most beautiful art comes from those who create for themselves, not for anyone else. The word struck something deep inside Emily. For the first time in a long while, she felt inspired. She didn't know what would come of it, but in that moment, she realized that she wanted to create, to express herself, to build something that was uniquely hers. Maybe I'll start painting, Emily said, a small smile forming on her lips. I don't know if I'm any good, but I want to try. The woman's eyes lit up with encouragement. That's the first step. Just try. Art is about finding your voice. As Emily left the gallery that afternoon, she felt a sense of renewal. She wasn't sure where this newfound inspiration would lead, but she knew one thing for certain: she was no longer bound by the past. She was learning to live for herself, one small step at a time. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time since Olivia's death, Emily felt like she was moving in the right direction. The next few weeks brought a quiet rhythm to Emily's life. She continued to visit the small town's art gallery, where she'd been inspired to pick up painting. It was awkward at first, her brush strokes hesitant, unsure. But as she spent more time with the canvas, she found a sense of release. Each painting felt like a conversation with herself, as if her emotions were flowing directly onto the surface without any filters. She painted not just the things she saw, but the feelings that had been buried deep within her for so long. Colors, dark blues, soft pinks, fiery oranges, began to emerge as her expression of grief, of hope, and of rebirth. At first, she didn't show anyone her work. The thought of sharing it with others felt too vulnerable, too raw. But then, one afternoon, as she was putting the finishing touches on her latest piece, a swirling mix of deep purple and gold that she felt embodied her journey, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Alexander. She hadn't seen him since their conversation weeks ago. After she'd turned down his proposal, he had respected her space, but now, standing at the front door of the mansion, his presence was both familiar and strange. "Emily," he said, his voice tentative but filled with the same warmth she remembered. "I didn't expect you to answer the door. I thought you might be out." Emily felt a flutter of nerves in her chest. It wasn't that she hadn't thought about him, she had. There had been moments, especially during the quiet evenings when she couldn't sleep, when she had wondered about him, how he was coping, if he had moved on, or if he was still holding out hope for something more between them. But she hadn't been prepared to face him today, not with all the emotions that had built up since their last conversation. "I was just painting," Emily said, feeling a bit self-conscious. She stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. Alexander hesitated for a moment before stepping across the threshold. He looked around the house with a wistful expression, as though he, too, was seeing it in a new light, one that was quieter and less filled with the promise of their former life together. "Do you mind if I sit?" he asked, looking at the living room couch. Emily nodded, and they both sat down, a comfortable distance between them. She wasn't sure what to say, but the silence wasn't awkward. It felt like an unspoken understanding between them, a shared recognition that things had changed, but that there was still something important connecting them. "You've been painting?" Alexander asked, his tone soft. "That's new. I didn't know you were into art." Emily smiled a little. "Neither did I, really. It's been something I've started to explore. I guess it's one of those things I never allowed myself to do when I was wrapped up in everything else." Alexander nodded slowly, his eyes searching hers. "I'm glad to see you're doing something for yourself." Emily's smile faded slightly as she thought of everything that had come before this moment, the decision to leave Olivia's life behind, the moments of grief and loneliness, the sense of loss she still carried like an invisible weight. She shifted in her seat, looking down at her hands, which fidgeted nervously in her lap. "I've been trying to find myself again," she said quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "It's been harder than I thought. I spent so many years living for someone else, I didn't know who I was anymore. And it feels like I'm starting from scratch." Alexander's gaze softened. "I can't imagine what that's like, Emily. Losing someone like Olivia, then having to let go of the life you knew, it's a lot. But you're not alone in this. I know I haven't been around much, but I'm still here for you. I want to be." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. She had been trying so hard to distance herself from the life she'd shared with him, trying to step away from the person she had been in that relationship, but hearing him say that, hearing the sincerity in his voice, made her question everything. Was it really possible for them to start over? Could they rebuild something after all that had happened? But no matter how much she wanted to reach out to him, something held her back. The truth was, she had changed. She wasn't the same person who had been swept into Alexander's world of wealth and expectations. She wasn't the same person who had once longed to be a part of that life. "I don't know what I want anymore, Alexander," she confessed, the words escaping her before she could stop them. "I don't know if I can go back to who I was, or if I even want to. I don't know if I'm the person you wanted me to be, or if I can be that person ever again." His face fell slightly, but there was no anger, no resentment in his expression. He looked resigned. "I never wanted you to be someone you weren't, Emily. And I know I've made mistakes, asking you to take Olivia's place. That wasn't fair to you." Emily swallowed hard, her throat tightening with emotion. She had never expected him to say that. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to one that she had ever heard from him. "I didn't know who I was without Olivia, Alexander. I was just existing, not living. But now, I'm starting to find my way. I don't know what that looks like, or where it'll lead, but I can't go back to what we had." There was a long silence between them. Alexander's gaze drifted toward the window, as if he were searching for the right words to say. Finally, he looked back at her. "I don't want to hold you back, Emily," he said quietly. "I think I understand now. You need to find your own life. You're right to take that time for yourself." His acceptance was like a weight being lifted from Emily's shoulders. It wasn't the easy answer, the one that would have allowed her to slide back into her old life with him, but it was the right one. She felt a pang of sadness at the thought of what they might have had, but at the same time, she felt a sense of relief. It was finally over. The chapter that had been holding them both back was closing, and they were both free to move on. "I'm sorry, Emily," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never meant to make you feel like you were living in someone else's shadow." "I know," Emily said, her voice soft. "But I've learned a lot from this. And I'll be okay. We'll both be okay." For the first time in a long time, Emily truly believed that. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she was ready to face it, on her own terms. As Alexander left, Emily stood at the door, watching him walk down the long driveway. A strange mixture of relief and sadness settled in her chest. She didn't regret her decision. It was the right one for her, and that was what mattered most. Later that evening, Emily returned to her painting. She wasn't sure where the next brushstroke would take her, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. The future was still uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. She had taken the first step toward creating her own life, and she was ready for whatever came next. After her conversation with Alexander, Emily's sense of purpose felt both fragile and exhilarating. The weight of his departure, the recognition that their relationship was truly over, left her with an odd mix of emptiness and freedom. The mansion, which had once felt like a prison, now seemed like an empty canvas, one that was ready to be transformed, just like her life. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to breathe without feeling the suffocating pressure of living up to someone else's expectations. The absence of Alexander's presence in her life was a sharp reminder of how much she had sacrificed. But it was also a reminder of how much she had lost along the way: her own sense of self, her own desires, her own purpose. In the days that followed, Emily began to venture further into the town, taking long walks in the early mornings and late afternoons. She found solace in the small interactions she had with the townspeople, whether it was a kind word from the baker or a casual conversation with a local artist. It wasn't much, but it was grounding. One afternoon, as Emily wandered into a quaint bookstore, the bell above the door chimed softly as she entered. The scent of paper, dust, and leather greeted her, an aroma that immediately felt comforting. She loved books. They had been a quiet refuge throughout her life. But it had been years since she had indulged in reading for pleasure, and now, standing in front of the shelves, she felt an unfamiliar craving for something new, something that could inspire her. She wandered between the aisles, running her fingers over the spines of the books. Her eyes landed on a collection of poetry, works from poets she had read in high school but never fully appreciated. She pulled the book from the shelf, flipping through its pages as she read the lines aloud softly to herself. The world is too much with us, late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. The word struck a chord deep within her. She had been so caught up in the world of appearances, in the world of wealth and expectation, that she had forgotten the simple, raw beauty of the world around her. She had been living in a haze, too absorbed by the noise to truly hear the quiet. She flipped through the pages some more, feeling a deep sense of connection to the poems. After a few moments, she placed the book in her hands on the counter. The woman behind the counter, who had been quietly observing Emily, smiled warmly. "You know, I don't often see people stop to read poetry these days," the woman said. "It's refreshing." Emily smiled shyly. "I used to read poetry a lot when I was younger. But life got in the way." The woman nodded, as if she understood. "It has a way of doing that. But it's never too late to reconnect with things that matter to you." With that simple statement, Emily felt like the last of her barriers crumbled. She was finally beginning to understand something that had eluded her for so long, the importance of reconnecting with herself, her passions, her interests. And poetry, with its simple beauty and raw emotion, was a key part of that. After paying for the book, she left the bookstore with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't a grand revelation, but it was the beginning of something small and significant. Emily had started to realize that healing wasn't just about moving forward. It was about revisiting the things that had once brought her joy and rediscovering them for herself. The days that followed became a strange balancing act for Emily. She spent time in the art gallery, experimenting with her painting, but she also allowed herself the space to read, to explore, and to simply be. There were moments of clarity, moments where she felt as though she could finally hear her own voice under the noise of her past. She wasn't just the twin who had lost her other half, she was Emily. She was learning to reclaim her identity. But as she grew stronger in her own self-awareness, the ghosts of her past began to stir once again. One evening, as she sat in the garden with a cup of tea, she received an unexpected call from her mother, Helena. "Emily, I know we haven't spoken much lately." Her mother's voice was tight, the words carefully measured. "But there's something I need to tell you. It's about Olivia." Emily's stomach clenched at the mention of Olivia's name. The ghost of her twin sister still lingered, even as she tried to move forward. She had avoided discussing Olivia for so long, not wanting to face the depths of her grief again. But this call, felt different. She braced herself, not knowing what to expect. "What is it, Mom?" Emily asked, her voice betraying a trace of anxiety. Her mother paused, as though gathering the courage to speak. "It's about the will. Olivia left something for you. She wanted to make sure you had it, in case something ever happened." Emily's heart skipped a beat. A will? Her sister had left something for her. It wasn't like Olivia to leave anything without explaining herself. She had always been so pragmatic, so in control. Emily suddenly felt a sense of foreboding wash over her. What could it be? "What is it?" Emily asked, unable to hide the tremble in her voice. "There's a letter. It was written shortly before the accident." Helena's voice grew quieter. "She was planning on giving it to you, but, well, she never had the chance." Emily swallowed hard. "I'll come by tomorrow to pick it up." The conversation ended abruptly, and Emily was left alone in the garden, the weight of the phone call settling heavily on her chest. What could Olivia have left her? Was it something important? Or was it a final message, something that might finally help Emily understand the reasons behind her sister's actions, her secrets? The uncertainty of it all gnawed at Emily. She had spent so much time running away from the past, from the shadows of her sister, but now, it seemed like the past was determined to catch up with her. Was this letter the key to some deeper truth, or was it just another puzzle piece to a life that had been fractured beyond repair? She didn't know, but she knew one thing: she couldn't avoid it any longer. The following day, Emily drove to her mother's house with a heavy heart. The morning was crisp, the air still cool from the previous night's rain, and the world outside seemed at peace. But inside her, there was an uneasy storm brewing. The letter. Olivia's letter. What could it possibly say? Why hadn't Olivia shared it with her in life? Why had she kept it hidden away until now? Emily parked in the long driveway of her mother's sprawling estate. The house, nestled on the edge of the woods, always had a certain air of grandeur, but today, it felt more like a mausoleum than a home. As Emily stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door, she felt the weight of every step. She hadn't been to this house in months, not since she left the life she had known, not since the accident that tore her world apart. When her mother opened the door, Emily was struck by how much older Helena looked. Her once vibrant features seemed dulled, her eyes tired. The years had clearly taken their toll on her, just as they had on Emily. "Come in, darling," Helena said with a soft smile, but there was a sadness behind her eyes. As Emily stepped into the house, the familiar scent of wood polish and old books greeted her. Nothing had changed. It was as if time had stood still in this house, preserved, just like the memories of a life she no longer belonged to. Helena led Emily to the living room, where a fire crackled softly in the hearth. The atmosphere was quiet, intimate. As they sat across from each other, Emily's mother handed her a thick, cream-colored envelope. "Here it is," Helena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you should have it. I know you two were close. You might find something in it that helps." Emily took the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind racing. The weight of it in her hands was almost too much to bear. "Do you know what it says?" Emily asked, her voice tight with emotion. Helena shook her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of grief and guilt. "No. I never read it. Olivia asked me to keep it sealed, to give it to you if, when the time came. I don't know why she felt that way, but I respected her wishes." Emily nodded, though her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She hesitated for only a moment before carefully peeling open the envelope. The paper inside was thick and worn, and as she unfolded it, the faint smell of lavender filled the air. The letter was written in Olivia's elegant handwriting, each word deliberate, each sentence carefully constructed. It was unmistakably Olivia, her sister's sharp, composed manner of speaking, even in writing. Emily took a deep breath and began to read aloud, the words thick with emotion. "Dear Emily. If you're reading this, then I am no longer here. I don't know how or when I will leave this world, but I know it's coming. And when it does, I need you to know something very important. I am sorry. For everything. For the way I kept secrets from you, for the way I pushed you away when I should have been there. I can never truly make up for the things I've done, but I want you to understand that every decision I made was with love, though I know it might not seem that way. There's something I need to tell you, something I never had the courage to say while I was alive. We were always so close, Em. But I've kept so much from you. And I can't leave this world without you knowing the truth. I have lived in the shadow of our family's expectations for so long, and in doing so, I dragged you into a life that wasn't yours. I know I have pushed you to follow in my footsteps, to fill a role you never asked for. I forced you to be someone you weren't, all because I couldn't bear the thought of losing what we had. But what I've come to realize is that you were never meant to follow my path. You were meant to walk your own, Em. I should have supported you in that, but I didn't. I was too afraid to let go. I've seen the way you've struggled, the way you've tried to live for everyone else but yourself. I know it hurt you, and for that, I am deeply sorry. I want you to promise me something, Em. Promise me that you will live your life for you. Promise me you won't let my mistakes define you. You have so much to offer this world, and you don't need to live in my shadow. Be free. Be happy. Please, take this chance to live a life you love. Don't make the same mistakes I did. And one last thing, Emily. I hope you find love. The kind that makes you feel like you found your true home. It's out there, I promise you. Don't be afraid to go after it, even if it feels impossible. With all my love. Olivia. As Emily finished reading the letter, her hands were shaking. She lowered the letter slowly, feeling the full weight of Olivia's words crash over her like a wave. For a long moment, she could barely breathe. It was as if her sister had left her a final, fragile gift, a key to understanding the truth of her own life. Her mind raced as she absorbed the content of the letter. The regrets, the apologies, the acknowledgement of everything that had gone wrong, it all made sense now. Olivia had known. She had known that Emily had never fully lived her own life, that she had been trapped by the expectations of others. And in the end, Olivia had realized that Emily deserved more, deserved to have her own story, her own path. But what was Emily supposed to do with this? Olivia was gone, and now Emily was left with a message that felt both like a burden and a blessing. How could she ever move forward when her sister's voice echoed in her mind, urging her to live her life for herself, to find happiness, to leave the past behind? Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but she held them back. She wouldn't cry, not yet. Not for this. She had to be strong, for Olivia, for herself. Mom, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. Helena reached out, her eyes soft with understanding. You don't need to say anything, Emily. I know this is a lot. Just know that Olivia loved you. And I know this will help you heal. She always wanted the best for you. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes quickly before turning the letter over in her hands. Thank you for keeping this. For trusting me with it. Her mother gave a small smile. You're welcome, darling. As Emily left her mother's house, the letter was still clutched tightly in her hands. She didn't know what to do with all of this yet, the guilt, the grief, the newfound freedom. But she knew one thing, Olivia had given her a gift, one that would change everything. Emily's hands were still trembling as she drove away from her mother's house, the weight of Olivia's letter heavy in her lap. She had barely absorbed the full extent of the letter's meaning, but one thing was crystal clear, it was time to let go. Olivia's words had carved a new path in front of her, one that wasn't defined by grief or guilt or the expectations of the past. It was a path of freedom, a freedom she wasn't sure she was ready for but couldn't ignore. As the road stretched before her, Emily realized how much she had been avoiding the truth. She had spent so long living in the shadows of others, first her sister, then Alexander, then the life her parents had expected her to lead. But now Olivia's letter had shattered the illusion that she could continue pretending. She couldn't keep living in a way that didn't feel true to who she was. Olivia's final words had given her permission to move on, to finally live a life that was hers and hers alone. But could she? The question haunted her as she drove back to the mansion. She had left that life behind months ago, but even in her isolation, she still found herself tethered to it. The mansion was still there, a reminder of all the promises she had made to herself, to Alexander, and to her family. Was she strong enough to fully step away from that world? Could she sever the ties that had kept her in its grip? When Emily arrived at the mansion, the silence inside was deafening. The sprawling estate felt more like a shell than a home, its grandeur only amplifying her sense of loneliness. The house, once a symbol of power and security, now seemed like a gilded cage. She walked through the rooms slowly, taking in the quiet, the stillness. Everything was exactly as she had left it. The furniture was polished, the curtains drawn, the air thick with dust and memories. She found herself in the grand living room, standing before the fireplace where she and Alexander had once shared so many conversations. How many times had they sat here, talking about their future? How many promises had been made in this very room? Her eyes fell on the portrait of herself and Olivia hanging on the wall. The image of the two sisters, so full of life, so full of promise, felt like a ghost in the room. Olivia was smiling brightly, her arm wrapped around Emily's shoulders, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the painting's light. They had been so close, so inseparable. But now that closeness felt like a distant memory, a part of a life that had slipped through her fingers. The room felt suffocating, and Emily suddenly needed to breathe. She turned and walked toward the garden doors, stepping outside into the cool afternoon air. The garden, too, had once been a place of comfort for her, a refuge where she could think clearly. But even the serenity of the flowers and the trees felt like a reminder of a life she was no longer sure she wanted. As Emily wandered deeper into the garden, the sound of footsteps behind her caught her attention. She turned quickly to see Lucas standing at the edge of the stone path, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Can we talk?" She nodded slowly, surprised by the sudden appearance of her friend. It had been weeks since they last spoke, since she had come to terms with the fact that their relationship had shifted into something more than friendship. They had both been careful to keep their distance, but now, standing in the garden, it felt as though the space between them had finally narrowed. "What is it, Lucas?" Emily asked, her voice quieter than she intended. There was so much she wanted to say, so much that had been left unsaid. But now that he was here, she wasn't sure how to begin. "I've been thinking," he began, his words measured, "about everything that's happened. About you, and how I've been here for you, and yet I never really helped you find what you needed. I was so focused on being the support you needed that I didn't see that you were suffocating. I didn't see that you were running away from yourself." Emily took a deep breath, his words striking a chord deep within her. "I didn't know how to fix it," she admitted. "I didn't know how to fix me." Lucas stepped forward, his eyes filled with a mixture of tenderness and concern. "You don't have to fix everything, Emily. You just have to allow yourself to be." The simplicity of his words resonated deeply with her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like someone truly understood the weight she had been carrying. But even as she felt comforted by his presence, there was a nagging feeling inside her. The choices she had to make weren't easy, and no amount of comforting words could make the decision for her. "Lucas, I don't know what to do," she confessed. "I don't know how to move forward from all this. I've spent so much time running away, but now I'm faced with choices that scare me. I don't know if I can let go of everything I've built here. I don't know if I can walk away from the life I've known." Lucas reached out, taking her hand in his. The warmth of his touch was grounding, and she allowed herself to lean into it. For a moment, there was nothing but the quiet sounds of the garden around them, the rustling of leaves, the distant chirp of birds, and the steady beat of her own heart. "You don't have to walk away from everything," he said gently. "But you have to choose what matters. You have to choose what's right for you, even if it means leaving some things behind. You don't have to carry the weight of your past anymore. You can move forward. And if you need someone to help you find your way, I'll be here." Emily looked into his eyes, feeling a mixture of gratitude and fear. He was right, in a way. She couldn't carry the weight of the past forever. She couldn't let it define her any longer. But the question remained, was she ready to make that choice? Was she ready to step into the unknown, to leave behind the life she had known and embrace something completely different? She didn't have the answer yet. But as she stood there with Lucas, his hand still gently holding hers, she felt a small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find the courage to make that choice. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The next few days blurred into each other as Emily found herself trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. Her mind was filled with the weight of Olivia's letter, the gentle but persistent presence of Lucas, and the looming decision she had to make. The mansion, once a symbol of stability and wealth, now felt like a trap, a place where every room echoed with the expectations of the past. And as much as she longed for a fresh start, every step toward that future seemed to carry the heavy burden of what she was leaving behind. Lucas had insisted she take her time, that there was no rush to make a decision. But Emily knew that the longer she stayed in this place, the harder it would be to walk away. She had been living in limbo for too long, stuck between the life she had known and the life she wanted to create. The life Olivia had wanted for her. She stood in the grand hallway of the mansion one last time, her hand resting on the banister. The old wood felt smooth beneath her fingers, but it no longer brought her comfort. The house was cold, almost empty, even though the rooms were filled with memories of a life she had once tried to build. Her eyes drifted to the staircase where, years ago, she and Olivia had raced each other to the top, laughing, carefree. It was impossible to ignore how much had changed in such a short time. Olivia was gone. Alexander was gone. And now, Emily had to decide if she was going to stay and hold on to the past, or if she was going to leave and embrace the unknown future that stretched before her. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Lucas standing in the doorway of the living room, a faint smile on his lips. There was something in his eyes, something understanding, yet patient, that made her heart ache. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice soft, as if sensing her turmoil. Emily exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew she couldn't stay here forever. The decision was made. "I think so," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been holding on for so long, Lucas. But I think it's time to let go." Lucas stepped into the room, his presence grounding her. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his tone earnest. "I'm here. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily allowed herself to feel the weight of his words. She wasn't alone. And that simple truth gave her the courage she needed to take the first step. "I know," she said, her voice stronger now. "I'm not alone." That afternoon, Emily made her way to the office to handle the final details of the estate. It had been her family's home for generations, and there were business matters that needed to be addressed before she could leave for good. The weight of those responsibilities was another layer she had to peel away before she could move forward. The office, like the rest of the mansion, felt cold and sterile. The rich mahogany furniture, the old leather-bound books, the paintings on the walls, all of it seemed to mock her in her current state of mind. It had all once seemed so important. Now, it was just a part of a life she was ready to leave behind. She sat at the desk, her fingers hovering over the papers in front of her. The decision was simple, really. Sell the house, liquidate the assets, and move on. But even as she made the decision, she felt a pang of guilt. This place had been her family's legacy. She had grown up here. She had learned the lessons of duty and responsibility here. How could she just let it all go? But then, she remembered Olivia's letter, Olivia's words about freedom, about living for herself. Emily could already hear her sister's voice in her mind, urging her to move on. Olivia had wanted this for her. Olivia had wanted her to be free. Taking a deep breath, Emily picked up the pen and signed the papers. The decision was made. There would be no turning back. Later that evening, Emily and Lucas sat on the balcony of the mansion, the cool night air wrapping around them like a soft blanket. The stars above were scattered across the sky, each one a tiny light in the vastness of the universe. It was peaceful, yet for Emily, it felt like the calm before the storm. She had made the decision to leave, but now that it was real, the fear crept in. Was she making a mistake? Was she being impulsive? How could she leave everything behind? Her family, the mansion, the life that had been so carefully built. "You're quiet," Lucas observed, his voice calm and steady. He had been watching her for a while, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "What's on your mind?" Emily stared out at the horizon, the city lights twinkling in the distance. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," she admitted. "I'm scared, Lucas. What if I'm making the wrong choice? What if I'm just running away?" "You're not running away, Emily," he said softly, his voice unwavering. "You're choosing yourself. That's not running. It's living." She turned to look at him, his gaze steady and kind. There was no judgment in his eyes, only support. "I don't know if I can do it without feeling guilty," Emily whispered, the weight of her emotions crashing down on her. "I feel like I'm abandoning everything I've known. I feel like I'm betraying my family, my legacy." Lucas took her hand gently in his touch reassuring. "You're not betraying anyone. You're living for yourself. You're making a choice to move forward, to take control of your own life. That's not a betrayal, Emily. It's the most important thing you can do." She swallowed hard, feeling the tears well up in her eyes. "I'm so scared," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "What if I fail? What if everything falls apart?" "Then you get back up," Lucas replied, his voice firm but gentle. "But you'll never know what you can achieve if you don't try. And you don't have to do it alone. I'm here, and I'll always be here." Emily looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never felt more understood, more supported than she did in this moment. Taking a deep breath, she wiped away the tears that had started to fall. She was scared, yes. But she also felt something else. Something stronger. A flicker of hope. A spark of courage. "I'm ready," she said softly, her voice steady now. "I'm ready to let go." Lucas smiled, the warmth of his expression wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. "Then let's go." The next morning, Emily packed her bags. It felt surreal. This was the first time in years that she hadn't felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on her, the first time she wasn't trying to mold herself into someone else's expectations. The mansion was no longer her home, it was just a place, a memory. And now, it was time to walk away from it. She spent hours sorting through her things, books, clothes, old letters. Each item she touched seemed to carry its own significance, its own piece of the life she was leaving behind. She came across a photo album tucked away in a drawer, a collection of memories, moments frozen in time. She flipped through the pages slowly, pausing at a picture of her and Olivia from their childhood, laughing as they played in the garden. Tears welled up in her eyes as she studied the photograph. She missed her sister so much. There was a time when they had shared everything, when their bond had been unbreakable. But now, Olivia was gone, and Emily was alone. The realization hit her hard, but she wiped her eyes and closed the album, putting it into the bag with the rest of her things. She didn't need to keep the past with her anymore. Olivia had given her permission to move on, and Emily had to honor that. Once the bags were packed, she made one final walk through the mansion. The house was still as grand as it had always been, but the walls seemed to echo with emptiness. Emily could almost hear the whispers of her family's past, whispers of duty, legacy, and tradition. But she wasn't bound by those expectations anymore. She had a new path now, a path that was hers to choose. Outside, the sky was bright and clear. The world felt open to her in a way it never had before. Lucas was waiting by his car, his expression soft but encouraging as she approached. He had offered to help her with the move, but she had insisted on handling it alone. This was her first step into her new life, and it was one she had to take on her own. "I'm ready," Emily said as she approached him, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. Lucas gave her a small smile. "You've got this," he said, opening the passenger door for her. "Let's go." As they drove away from the mansion, Emily looked out the window, watching as the familiar landscape slowly disappeared behind her. The city skyline, the hills in the distance, everything she had once known was fading away, replaced by a world of possibilities. The road ahead was uncertain, but that was the point. For the first time in her life, Emily wasn't tied to anyone's expectations but her own. She wasn't running from the past anymore. She was running toward the future. The future that Olivia had wanted for her. But even as she drove away, Emily knew that leaving the mansion and her old life behind wouldn't be as simple as just walking away. The memories, the ties, the guilt, they would all follow her. And no matter how far she ran, she would always carry pieces of the past with her. But that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Her past had shaped her into who she was, and she couldn't escape it. What mattered now was how she chose to move forward. "I don't even know where I'm going," Emily admitted, her voice quiet. Lucas glanced at her before returning his eyes to the road. "It doesn't matter," he said. "You'll figure it out. One step at a time. And I'll be here to help you when you need it." Emily gave a small smile, grateful for his unwavering support. It meant more to her than she could express. "Thank you, Lucas. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll never have to find out," he replied, his tone sincere. As they drove farther from the mansion, Emily's thoughts began to drift toward her next steps. Where would she go? What would she do? She had no clear answers, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the uncertainty. In fact, she welcomed it. She had spent so many years living for others, doing what was expected of her. Now, she was free to choose her own path. "I think I want to go to the coast," Emily said suddenly, the idea forming in her mind as she spoke. "Somewhere by the ocean. A fresh start, you know. I always wanted to live by the water." Lucas turned his head slightly to glance at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I like that idea. The coast sounds perfect." Emily nodded, her heart lifting at the thought. The coast was a place of renewal, of possibility. She had always felt a deep connection to the ocean, to its vastness and its unpredictability. It was a place where she could let go, where she could breathe again. "I think I need to be by the water," she said, her voice full of quiet determination. "It's where I can finally clear my mind and figure out what comes next." Lucas didn't respond right away, but Emily could feel the weight of his support. He was there for her, not just in the easy moments, but in the uncertain ones too. And that gave her the strength she needed to move forward. The drive to the coast took several hours, but the time passed quickly as they talked. Emily found herself opening up to Lucas in ways she hadn't expected. They spoke about everything, her fears, her hopes, the things she'd left behind. And through it all, Lucas listened without judgment, offering his quiet support when needed. By the time they reached the coast, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of pink, orange, and purple. The air was cool and salty, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore calming in a way that felt almost therapeutic. Emily stepped out of the car and took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh sea air. The sight of the ocean stretched out before her, endless and powerful, filled her with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She had made it. She had left the past behind and stepped into the unknown. Lucas stood beside her, his presence steady and comforting as always. "How does it feel?" he asked. "It feels right," Emily said, her voice full of emotion. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." They stood in silence for a while, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. The future was uncertain, but Emily knew one thing for sure, she was no longer bound by the past. The ocean, the freedom, and the possibilities ahead were all waiting for her. And for the first time in her life, she was ready to embrace them. The ocean breeze kissed Emily's face as she stood on the rocky outcrop, staring out at the vast expanse of water before her. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short time. The mansion, the legacy of her family, seemed so distant now, almost like a lifetime ago. Yet, there were moments when it felt like it was still there, hovering just behind her, a shadow of what she had once known. But as the waves crashed against the shore below her, Emily felt something new, something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. She glanced back at the small house they had rented for the time being, nestled just a few hundred yards away from the cliffside. It wasn't grand by any means, but it was cozy, quaint, exactly what she needed right now. The salt air and the gentle hum of the waves were the only sounds she could hear. The city was miles away, and in that moment, it felt like a world she had left behind. "I'll have to get used to the quiet," she murmured to herself, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Lucas, who had been unpacking the car when she left, appeared behind her on the path. "You're not used to that, huh?" he asked with a teasing grin. His shirt was rumpled from the drive, and his hair was windswept, but his presence was grounding, comforting. "No," Emily replied, laughing softly. "I'm used to noise, chaos, not this. But I think I'm going to like it." She turned to face him, her eyes searching his for reassurance. "It's nice, Lucas. I never realized how much I needed this." Lucas leaned against the stone wall nearby, folding his arms. "It's not just the ocean you needed. It's the space to breathe. To figure things out without the weight of the past hanging over you." His words were exactly what she had needed to hear. She hadn't fully realized it until now, but that was what she had been running from, the weight of expectation, the pressure of living up to something that never truly belonged to her. This house, this place, was a new beginning. A chance to redefine who she was, without anyone else's influence, without the ghosts of her past. "I think I'm finally starting to understand that," Emily said, her voice soft, yet certain. She took a deep breath, letting the salty air fill her lungs. "I've been living for everyone else for so long. It feels good to just be." Lucas nodded, his eyes softening as he watched her. "You deserve it. To live for yourself. To find your own path." For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the ocean waves filling the space between them. Emily felt the weight of his words settle deep in her chest. She had spent so many years trying to live up to what others expected of her, her parents, her family, society. But now, for the first time, she was allowed to simply exist. And she was realizing that was enough. That evening, the small house came alive with warmth. Emily had found a few simple furnishings to make it feel more like home: cushions on the couch, a small table by the window where she could look out at the sea while sipping coffee. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was hers. They ate dinner on the back porch, overlooking the horizon as the sun set. The colors of the sky bled from gold to pink to deep purple, and the ocean seemed to shimmer in response. Emily felt the tension she didn't even realize she'd been carrying slowly melt away with each passing minute. "It's beautiful here," she said quietly, her eyes on the horizon. Lucas nodded, his gaze on the same view. "It is. There's something about being by the water that makes everything else fade away." "Yeah," Emily trailed off. She felt the weight of the moment, the stillness, the quiet. It was everything she needed. The world felt smaller here in the best way. It felt like she could finally breathe, finally exist on her own terms. "And it's just the beginning," Lucas added, his voice steady and reassuring. "This is your fresh start, Emily. Whatever you want to make of it, you can. You've already taken the hardest step." "I know," Emily said, her voice quiet but confident. "It's just, I don't know where to begin." "You begin with yourself," Lucas replied. "You give yourself permission to be who you are, to figure things out, and to take your time. No one's rushing you. You have all the time you need." For a moment, Emily let his words sink in. It felt strange, this idea of no pressure. No deadlines. No expectations. For so long, she had been driven by the weight of her responsibilities, running the family estate, taking care of the business, keeping up with what everyone else expected from her. But now, she was in control. She could shape her own future. And the thought was both terrifying and liberating. Over the next few weeks, Emily threw herself into small, simple tasks, unpacking, organizing, finding new ways to make the house feel more like home. But in between those things, she found herself returning to the beach. It was her place of peace. There, with the sand beneath her feet and the endless ocean in front of her, she could think clearly. She could breathe deeply. She could just be. One afternoon, as she sat by the water's edge, watching the waves roll in, Emily felt something shift inside her. She didn't know what it was yet, but she could feel it, a spark of something, maybe hope, maybe clarity, that had been buried beneath years of grief and fear. Olivia had once said that the ocean was where she felt most connected to the world. Emily was starting to understand that feeling. The ocean had a way of making everything else feel small, insignificant even. It gave her space to think, to dream, and to just be. And it was there, on that stretch of beach, that she made a decision. It wasn't a huge decision, not yet. But it was the start of something important. She was going to take her time, let herself explore this new chapter, and focus on what she truly wanted. She wasn't going to rush into anything, not this time. Lucas, as always, had been a steady presence by her side. He respected her space, never pushing, always there when she needed him. Emily realized just how much she had come to depend on him, not just as a friend, but as someone who truly cared about her happiness, someone who was there for her without. The first morning on the coast, Emily woke early. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below was unlike anything she had ever heard. It was raw and powerful, a reminder of the strength of nature and the vastness of the world. The ocean stretched out as far as the eye could see, its surface glistening in the early morning light. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her, as though she were exactly where she was meant to be. She stood at the window of the small cottage she had rented, her hands resting lightly on the sill, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The colors of the sky shifted from deep purple to soft pinks and oranges, casting a warm glow over the world. It was beautiful, so much more than she had expected. The ocean, the sand, the cool breeze. It felt like a fresh beginning, like a new chapter was unfolding before her. As she stood there, taking in the view, her thoughts drifted back to the decision that had brought her here. She had left everything behind, her family's mansion, the life she knew, the expectations that had been placed on her shoulders. And now, she was standing on the edge of something new. It was exhilarating, but also terrifying. Emily wasn't sure what exactly she was supposed to do here. She hadn't made any concrete plans for the future, hadn't figured out where her life was headed. But she knew that, for the first time, it didn't matter. She didn't need to have all the answers. She just needed to be. After a while, she decided to take a walk along the beach to clear her mind. It was early enough that the shore was mostly empty, save for a few joggers and a couple of people walking their dogs. The sand felt soft beneath her feet, the cool morning air filling her lungs as she walked along the water's edge. She could feel the salt in the air, taste it on her lips as the waves lapped at her feet. The ocean, with its endless expanse, was both humbling and freeing. It reminded her that there was so much more to life than what she had known. So much more than the walls of the mansion, the endless cycle of duty and expectation. The ocean was free, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she could be free too. She continued walking, letting her mind wander. She had no plan, no direction, but that was okay. She didn't need a destination. Not yet. For now, she just needed to exist. Later that day, Emily ventured into the small coastal town that nestled along the shore. It was a quiet place, with narrow streets lined by small shops and cafes. It felt like a world away from the life she had left behind, the hustle and bustle of the city, the high society parties, the weight of her family's legacy. Here, everything moved at a slower pace, and the people seemed genuinely content with their simple lives. She wandered through the streets, taking in the sights and sounds. A small bookstore caught her attention, and she found herself stepping inside. The familiar scent of paper and ink enveloped her as she browsed through the shelves. There was something calming about being surrounded by books, by the knowledge and stories contained within them. She ran her fingers along the spines of a few volumes, searching for something to spark her interest. After a while, Emily found herself sitting in the back corner of the bookstore, sipping a warm cup of tea. She was lost in her thoughts when a voice broke through her reverie. "You look like you could use some company." Emily looked up to see a young woman standing by her table, a friendly smile on her face. She had short, curly hair and bright eyes that sparkled with curiosity. "Sorry to interrupt," the woman said, noticing Emily's surprise. "I just couldn't help but notice you sitting here all alone. I'm Mia, by the way. I work here. Are you new to town?" Emily smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't realized she needed. "Yes, I just moved here. I'm still getting used to it." Mia took a seat across from her without waiting for an invitation, as if she had known Emily for years. "Well, welcome to the coast. It's a beautiful place, isn't it? It has a way of changing people, making them feel like they can breathe again." "I think that's what I need," Emily admitted, grateful for the easy conversation. "A chance to breathe." Mia's eyes softened with understanding. "I get that. This place has a way of helping people start over. I know it sounds cliché, but it's true. Sometimes you have to leave everything behind to find out who you really are." Emily nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. Mia didn't know her story, but she understood more than she realized. "I'm Emily," she said, her voice a little hoarse. "And I'm trying to figure that out. Who I really am." Mia smiled warmly. "Well, I'm sure you'll find your way. It's a process, but the coast has a way of guiding you. If you need anything, or if you just want someone to talk to, I'm here." Emily felt a small spark of hope ignite within her. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, a friendship, a fresh start. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't entirely alone. Over the next few weeks, Emily spent more time in the small town. She continued her daily walks along the beach, and she visited the bookstore whenever she had a free moment. Mia became a regular part of her routine, and the two women quickly formed a bond. Mia was a little older than Emily, and her easygoing nature and genuine interest in Emily's life made it easy for her to open up. Mia had her own story of starting over, of leaving a career in the city to live by the ocean and find peace. Emily found herself listening to Mia's tales of reinvention, of living without the constraints of expectations, and she couldn't help but wonder if that could be her, too. Lucas, too, was still a steady presence in Emily's life. He called her often, checking in to see how she was adjusting. His voice, though always kind and supportive, still carried a hint of concern. He wanted to know that she was doing okay, that she was truly finding herself again. "I'm doing better," Emily would tell him, though at times, it felt like she was still finding her way. She wasn't sure what came next, what path she was supposed to walk, but she knew she was making progress. She was no longer running from her past. She was learning how to live in the present. One evening, Emily walked along the beach again, the waves crashing in the distance. The sun had just begun to set, casting a golden glow over the water. As she walked, she thought about everything she had left behind, the mansion, the family legacy, the expectations. But there was no longer any sadness in those thoughts. Instead, she felt a sense of freedom, of possibility. She had taken the first step. And now, the journey was hers to create. As she stood at the water's edge, letting the cool waves lap at her feet, Emily smiled. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The days that followed were a blur of discovery. Each one seemed to unfold in new, unexpected ways, and Emily was beginning to feel the weight of her past life drift away. She had started to carve out a routine for herself, mornings on the beach, afternoons spent reading or visiting the bookstore, and evenings by the fireplace, her mind wandering through books and thoughts. The simplicity was comforting, and yet, there was a part of her that still felt restless. She often found herself staring out at the ocean, lost in its vastness. It felt like a reflection of her own life, so much unknown, so much open to interpretation. What was she really seeking? A fresh start, sure. But was she just running from the past? Or was she truly giving herself the opportunity to build something new? Those questions lingered, but for now, she was content to let them hang in the air. She wasn't in a hurry to find all the answers. After all, she had spent her whole life living for others, striving for things that didn't bring her happiness. Maybe it was time to simply live for herself. It was a warm Tuesday afternoon when Emily's world once again tilted, though she wasn't expecting it. She had just finished a cup of tea at Mia's cafe, feeling the soothing effects of the conversation they had shared. The cafe was tucked into the heart of the town, a cozy, welcoming spot where locals gathered for their daily dose of caffeine and conversation. Mia had introduced her to a few of the regulars, all of whom greeted her with open arms and friendly smiles. As Emily stepped out of the cafe, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. It took a moment for her to place him, tall, with short dark hair, dressed in a sharp, well-fitted jacket. It was Jake, the man she had met briefly at the charity gala months ago. The memory came rushing back, and she felt a strange mix of discomfort and curiosity. Jake had been one of the few people at the event who hadn't seemed caught up in the social game. He had been kind to her then, and his words about finding peace in unexpected places still lingered in her mind. But seeing him now, here on the coast, was an unexpected twist of fate. He spotted her at the same time, his expression lighting up with recognition. "Emily," he called out, his voice warm and familiar. "What are you doing here?" Surprised by his greeting, Emily walked toward him. "Jake," she replied, offering a tentative smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," he said with a chuckle. "I come here sometimes to get away from the madness of the city. It's a good place to clear your head." Emily felt a pang of curiosity. "I never expected to find peace here. But the coast, it's different." "It has that effect on people," Jake agreed. "You look good. I mean, you look free. It's different than when we met. Back then, you seemed weighed down." Emily hesitated. His observation was keen, but it also made her feel vulnerable. Had she really been that obvious back then? She forced a smile. "I guess I'm just trying to figure things out." "I get it," Jake said. "Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. But sometimes, those curves can be the start of something better." She looked at him, wondering if that was the truth or just something people said when they were trying to comfort someone. Still, his words held a certain sincerity. It was comforting to hear someone else, someone outside of her immediate circle, recognize the transformation she had gone through. For so long, she had been burdened by her family's expectations and the weight of her past. Now, she was slowly learning to carry less, to allow herself to let go. "I didn't think I'd end up here," Emily admitted. "But it feels like the right place, in a way I can't really explain." Jake nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "That's the thing about this place. It has a way of pulling people in. When I first came here, I didn't know what I was looking for either. But eventually, you just realize that the ocean doesn't ask for explanations. It just is. And sometimes that's enough." There was something oddly comforting about the simplicity of his words. He was right. The ocean didn't ask anything of her. It didn't judge or demand, it just existed, calmly, powerfully, relentlessly. "So, what brought you to the coast?" Emily asked, curious. "I needed a break from everything," Jake said, his expression distant for a moment. "The city, my job, everything just became too much. I needed a place to breathe, to slow down." So, here I am, trying to figure things out just like everyone else. Emily nodded, feeling an unexpected connection to him. It wasn't just the town that had drawn them here, it was the same underlying search for peace, for clarity. "You're not staying forever, are you?" she asked, a hint of playfulness in her voice. Jake smirked. "I'm not sure. For now, I think I'll stick around. See where the wind takes me." Emily laughed. "I like that approach. I'm still figuring out where the wind is taking me." "Well, you're in the right place," Jake said, his smile warm. "Let me know if you ever want company while you're figuring it out. We could grab dinner sometime, nothing fancy, just something simple." The invitation was casual, but there was something about it that felt genuine. Emily wasn't sure what to expect from the encounter. After all, she had just met Jake a few months ago and didn't know him well. But she appreciated his openness, his willingness to connect. She had spent so much of her life being guarded, letting only a few people truly get close to her. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to open up a little more. "I'd like that," she said, her voice a little softer than before. "Let's do that." As they parted ways, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a casual encounter. She had no idea what to expect from Jake, but she knew that meeting him here, at this point in her life, was no coincidence. Was this the start of something new, something more than just a fleeting connection? Or was she simply filling the emptiness left by her past? She wasn't sure. But there was one thing she did know, she was ready to find out. The days after her meeting with Jake felt like a slow, deliberate turning of a page in a book she hadn't known she was writing. Emily found herself feeling lighter, the shadows of her past not quite as heavy as they had been before. There was an unfamiliar sense of freedom in her heart, one that made every moment feel full of potential. Every morning, when she woke up to the sound of the waves and the smell of salt in the air, she had the sense that she was exactly where she needed to be. Though Emily still wasn't certain what the future held, something about the rhythm of life on the coast felt right. The simplicity of it all, the small town, the gentle ebb and flow of the ocean, the unhurried pace of everyday life, provided her with the space to breathe, to think, and perhaps most importantly, to heal. Her daily walks along the beach had become a sort of ritual. They allowed her time to think, to reflect, and sometimes, to just be present. She loved the way the water rushed against the shore, how the foam would gently kiss her feet as the tide rolled in. It had a grounding effect on her, reminding her that the world was much larger than her past, that time moved forward, whether she was ready for it or not. One evening, after a long walk, Emily returned to her cottage to find a message from Mia. It was simple. An invitation for dinner at the cafe later that evening. Emily's initial instinct was to decline. She had been spending so much time alone, and a part of her craved solitude. Yet, the pull of connection was strong. Maybe it was the idea of friendship, or simply the need to get out of her own head for a while. Either way, she found herself replying with a simple, "I'll be there." The cafe was more bustling than usual that night. Mia had told her that Wednesdays were always busy, but Emily didn't mind the energy. The warm, golden light that poured through the windows made everything feel cozy and inviting. The scent of freshly baked bread and rich coffee hung in the air, and the soft murmur of conversation surrounded her. As she walked in, she spotted Mia right away, sitting at a table near the window, her curly hair glowing in the ambient light. "Hey, there she is!" Mia called out as soon as she saw Emily. "I'm so glad you could make it." Emily smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for the easy camaraderie they had developed. "Wouldn't miss it," she replied, pulling out the chair across from Mia. "So, how's the coast treating you?" Mia asked, her eyes sparkling with genuine curiosity. "It's been, surprisingly peaceful," Emily replied, her voice carrying a mix of wonder and contentment. "I'm starting to think I might just find what I've been looking for here." "Glad to hear it," Mia said with a knowing smile. "I can tell you're not quite the same person who walked into this town a month ago." Emily chuckled softly. I feel like I'm still figuring it out. But I think I'm getting there. She paused, looking out at the ocean in the distance. It's like I'm finally learning how to breathe again. Mia nodded, taking a sip of her wine. You're not alone in that. A lot of people come to the coast to reset, to start fresh. You've got to give yourself time. It's like the ocean, constant but never the same. Emily smiled. She hadn't expected such wisdom from someone who seemed so carefree, but Mia had an uncanny way of speaking the truth in a way that didn't feel heavy. It was refreshing. The conversation flowed easily from there, touching on everything from books to dreams to the small quirks of their town. But as the evening wore on, a sudden shift in Mia's tone caught Emily off guard. So, what about Jake? Mia asked, her voice casual, but there was a glint of curiosity in her eyes. I saw you talking to him the other day. Emily blinked, slightly taken aback. She hadn't expected Mia to bring him up so soon, but there was no reason to avoid the question. We met a while back, Emily said, trying to keep her tone neutral. He's here for the same reason, I think, trying to find some peace. And? Mia prompted, her eyes twinkling as she waited for Emily to elaborate. Emily hesitated, unsure of how to frame her thoughts. There was something about Jake, something that both intrigued and unsettled her. He was kind, easy to talk to, and his presence felt comfortable in a way she hadn't expected. But Emily didn't know if that was just the result of loneliness or something more. I don't know, Emily admitted, swirling her glass of wine absent-mindedly. There's something about him, but I'm not sure if it's just familiarity, you know. I don't think I'm ready for anything serious. Mia raised an eyebrow, as if considering this carefully. I get it. Starting over is hard. But don't let fear stop you from experiencing something good, Emily. You've already made the decision to leave everything behind and start fresh. Maybe it's time to take a chance, on him or on yourself. Emily's heart skipped a beat at her words. She wasn't sure what Mia meant by that, but something about it struck a chord deep within her. I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of risk, Emily murmured, her voice soft. I've already lost so much. I don't want to lose anything else. Mia's gaze softened, and she reached across the table, giving Emily's hand a reassuring squeeze. You won't lose anything. If anything, you'll find more of yourself in the process. But you have to be willing to open your heart again, even if it feels scary. For a moment, Emily said nothing. She simply let the quiet conversation linger between them, the words of wisdom settling deep in her thoughts. That night, Emily walked back to her cottage under a starry sky, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Mia's words echoed in her head, take a chance on yourself. What did that even mean? For so long, she had lived with expectations, family expectations, societal expectations. Everything she had done had been in the service of someone else's idea of who she was supposed to be. But now, Emily was free. Free to make her own choices, free to carve out a new life. But could she really open herself up again? Could she trust someone, especially someone like Jake, with her heart? As she reached her front door, she stopped for a moment, letting the night air settle around her. The ocean's waves crashed in the distance, a rhythmic reminder that change was constant, inevitable, and necessary. For the first time in a long time, Emily wasn't afraid of change. She was ready for it. The following days felt like a mix of anticipation and uncertainty for Emily. She was becoming increasingly aware of the internal conflict stirring within her. The pull toward Jake was undeniable, but so was the fear of what might happen if she let herself fall into something she wasn't sure she was ready for. Mia's words echoed in her mind daily, take a chance on yourself. She spent the morning on the beach again, walking along the shore as the soft waves lapped at her feet. The sun was warm, but the cool ocean breeze made it bearable. She tried to lose herself in the vast horizon, hoping the peaceful rhythm of the sea would clear her thoughts. But the harder she tried, the more her mind returned to Jake. Her interaction with him was so simple, yet so profound. He had been kind, understanding, and offered her something she hadn't even realized she was missing, a chance to connect with someone who wasn't wrapped up in her past. But the fear of repeating the mistakes she'd made in her old life, of letting someone else define her again, kept her from fully embracing the possibility. Later that afternoon, Emily sat at Mia's cafe again, this time alone with a book in front of her. It had become a regular habit for her to stop by, even if it was just to sit quietly and read. The cafe had become a sanctuary of sorts, a place where she didn't have to be anything other than herself. As she read, the bell above the door chimed, signaling the entrance of a new customer. Emily glanced up and found herself locking eyes with Jake. He smiled, a small but genuine smile, and waved as he walked over to her table. "Hey, Emily. Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice as warm as it had been during their previous conversation. Emily hesitated for a moment but then nodded. "Sure, have a seat." Jake pulled out the chair and sat down, his casual demeanor making it easy to feel at ease. They exchanged a few pleasantries about the weather, the book she was reading, and the latest happenings around town, but Emily could tell there was an unspoken tension between them, something that had shifted since their last conversation. There was an awkward silence that followed before Jake spoke again. "So, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day," he said, his tone careful. "I don't want to push you into anything, but I also want to be honest about what I'm feeling." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had a feeling he was about to say something that would complicate things even further. "Look," Jake continued, "I don't want you to think I'm rushing things. I just feel like there's something real here. Something worth exploring. But I also understand that you might not be in the same place." Emily didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to take the leap, to dive into something new and exciting, but another part of her, one that had been conditioned by years of caution and self-preservation, was terrified of what might happen if she allowed herself to be vulnerable. "You're right," she finally said, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm not sure I'm ready for all of that." She gestured vaguely, as though the words she couldn't quite say hung heavy in the air between them. Jake nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I get it," he said after a pause. "I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for. I just wanted you to know where I stand." There was a brief silence before Emily spoke again, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've been through a lot in the past, Jake. I've had to rebuild myself piece by piece. And I'm still not sure who I am in all of this. I don't want to drag anyone else into that." Jake's expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly, his eyes warm with understanding. "I'm not asking you to drag me into anything, Emily. I'm asking if you'll let me in, if you'll let me get to know the person you are now, not the one you were before, not the one you think you should be. Just you." His words hung in the air, and Emily felt a flutter of hope, tempered by the familiar sense of doubt that always seemed to creep in when she was on the verge of something real. She wanted to believe him, to let herself feel something for him, but the past had taught her to be cautious. "I don't know if I can do that," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet." Jake smiled softly, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "That's okay. I'm not going anywhere, Emily. I'm here, whenever you're ready." Later that evening, Emily found herself on the beach again, walking along the water's edge, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. She felt like she was standing at a crossroads, torn between the person she had been and the person she was becoming. She could feel the pull of the past, the weight of her old life, trying to reel her back in. But there was also something drawing her forward. Something in Jake's eyes, in the way he had spoken to her with such patience and sincerity. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she had a choice. She wasn't just drifting along, being swept by the tides of fate. She could decide her own path, even if it meant taking risks and confronting her fears. As she walked, her mind drifted to the future, to what might happen if she took that leap of faith. She wasn't sure if she was ready for a relationship, or if she was even ready to let someone in. But maybe, just maybe, this was the moment that could change everything. The next few days passed slowly, each one filled with small moments of clarity and confusion. Emily spent more time with Mia, reflecting on her fears and desires, and gradually began to open up more about her past. Mia listened without judgment, offering support and wisdom when needed, but always encouraging Emily to trust herself and take risks. One morning, as Emily was walking along the beach again, she spotted Jake from a distance. He was standing near the water, looking out at the horizon, seemingly lost in thought. There was something about the way he stood there, so grounded, so present, that made Emily pause. She didn't approach him right away. Instead, she simply watched him, unsure of what to do next. But then, as if sensing her presence, Jake turned toward her and smiled. It wasn't a knowing smile, nor was it one of expectation. It was simply an invitation. "Hey," he called out softly, his voice carrying across the wind. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily didn't hesitate. She walked toward him, feeling the weight of her own uncertainty, but also the possibility of what lay ahead. This time, she was ready to listen, to the ocean, to Jake, and most importantly, to herself. The days following their conversation on the beach were filled with both tension and clarity for Emily. She couldn't shake the words Jake had said to her, nor the sincerity in his eyes. He hadn't pushed her, hadn't demanded anything. He'd simply let her know how he felt and given her the space to process. And yet, it left her feeling both relieved and unsure. Emily knew that it wasn't just about Jake, or even about her feelings toward him. It was about something much deeper, the way she had closed herself off from everything and everyone for so long. She had become so used to the quiet isolation of her new life, the calm routine of the beach and her small cottage, that the idea of inviting someone else into that space felt like a threat to the fragile peace she had built. But then there was Mia, always reminding her that peace didn't come from running away from the world, it came from learning how to live in it again. Slowly, Emily had begun to realize that maybe Mia was right. Maybe the world wasn't a place to fear but to embrace. And yet, every time she thought about taking a step toward Jake, doubts crept into her mind. Could she really let someone in? Could she trust that he wouldn't break her again? The scars of her past weren't so easily forgotten. She had learned the hard way that love could be both beautiful and destructive, and she didn't know if she was ready to risk it all again. It was a bright Thursday morning when Emily found herself walking toward the cafe again. Mia had texted her earlier in the day, inviting her to meet for lunch, and Emily had agreed. As she entered the cafe, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries filled her senses, and for the first time in a while, Emily felt a sense of comfort. "Hey there!" Mia called from a corner booth, her face lighting up as she waved Emily over. "Hi," Emily greeted her with a smile, sliding into the seat across from Mia. She felt a slight pang of nervousness, as if she were about to speak about something important. "Everything okay?" Mia asked, her voice gentle but curious. She could always tell when something was on Emily's mind. Emily hesitated, her fingers tapping nervously on the tabletop. She had been thinking about the conversation with Jake for days now, trying to make sense of her feelings. She had spent so much time running from the idea of love, of connection, that it was hard to know if she was even capable of moving forward. But she couldn't deny the pull she felt whenever she thought about him. "I think I'm ready," Emily said, her voice soft but resolute. Mia raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Ready for what?" "To take a chance," Emily said, her heart beating faster. "On Jake. On us. I'm still scared, but I think I want to see where it could go." Mia smiled widely, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "That's amazing, Emily. I'm so happy for you." Emily felt a weight lift off her chest, as though the decision she had been struggling with for so long had finally been made. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she was done letting fear hold her back. I'm still not sure what I'm doing, Emily continued, her voice filled with a mix of uncertainty and hope. But I think I owe it to myself to try, to stop living in the shadows of what happened before. Mia nodded, her expression turning serious. That's exactly it. You can't keep living in the past, Emily. It's like holding on to a weight that keeps dragging you down. You deserve to find happiness, even if it's scary. And you deserve to give yourself the chance to build something new, even if it's uncertain. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the truth of Mia's words settle deep inside her. She had spent so long avoiding the possibility of love, the fear of what might go wrong. But the truth was, the more she resisted, the more she was holding herself back from the life she could have. She wasn't going to let fear define her anymore. Thanks, Mia, Emily said softly, her gratitude flooding her heart. I don't think I would have made this decision without you. Anytime, Mia replied, her voice warm with affection. I'm just happy to see you take the next step. Later that afternoon, Emily found herself standing outside Jake's cottage, her heart pounding in her chest. She had called him earlier, telling him that she wanted to talk. She had been nervous, unsure of how to word everything, but he had been patient with her. He hadn't pressed for details, simply agreeing to meet when she was ready. Now, as she stood at his door, her breath catching in her throat, she wondered if she had made the right decision. What if this was a mistake? What if she was making the same mistakes again? But then she remembered Mia's words. You deserve to give yourself the chance to build something new. And that was enough to push her forward. She knocked on the door, her hand trembling slightly. A few moments later, Jake appeared, his smile warm and genuine. His eyes flickered with curiosity, but there was no pressure in his gaze. He wasn't asking anything of her, he was simply waiting for her to decide. Hey, he greeted her softly. You okay? Emily nodded, her voice shaky but steady. I'm okay. I've been thinking a lot, and I think I'm ready to take that step. To see where this could go. Jake's expression softened, and a small, relieved smile spread across his face. I've been waiting for you to say that. For a moment, they just stood there, the quiet between them speaking volumes. The weight of the past was still there, but Emily was ready to move forward, to let herself believe in something again. Are you sure? Jake asked, his voice gentle, as if wanting to make sure she was fully committed to the idea. I am, Emily said, her voice stronger now. I'm ready to see what happens, to not be afraid anymore. And just like that, the tension that had been building between them seemed to dissolve. Jake stepped aside, opening the door wider for her. Then come in, he said, his smile deepening. Let's see where this journey takes us. As Emily stepped into his cottage, she felt a shift within herself. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't running away. She was stepping towards something new, something unknown, but something that felt right. And in that moment, as she crossed the threshold into his world, she knew she was finally ready to stop letting her past control her. The future was hers to create, and with Jake by her side, perhaps the next chapter of her life would be one filled with hope instead of fear. The days after Emily's decision to move forward with Jake felt like an awakening. There was a certain lightness in the air, as though a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She was no longer dwelling in the shadows of her past, but stepping toward the possibility of a future that was hers to shape. Jake had been patient with her, understanding of the uncertainty she still carried. He didn't rush her, but every day he showed up with unwavering kindness and respect. It was a stark contrast to the relationships she had known before, relationships built on expectations, manipulation, and fear. Jake seemed different. He was steady, grounded, and most importantly, he allowed her the space to be herself. They spent their time together doing simple things, walking along the beach, talking about their pasts, sharing their dreams. With each passing day, Emily felt the walls she had built around herself begin to crumble. She had feared that opening up to someone would expose her vulnerabilities, but instead, it felt like a quiet release. For the first time, she could breathe without the weight of her fears pressing down on her. It was a Friday afternoon when Emily decided to invite Jake to her cottage for dinner. She had always been a bit of a private person, preferring the solace of her small home over the busy noise of public spaces. But something about the idea of cooking for Jake, of sharing a piece of her life with him, felt like an important step in their relationship. The air inside her cottage smelled of fresh herbs and garlic, the soft lighting casting a warm glow across the room. Emily had prepared a simple meal, pasta with a homemade sauce, a salad, and a bottle of wine that Mia had recommended. She was nervous, unsure of how the evening would unfold, but she told herself that she didn't need to overthink it. This was just two people enjoying each other's company, no expectations, just the possibility of something genuine. As she set the table, a knock on the door startled her, and she quickly wiped her hands on a towel before rushing to answer. When she opened the door, Jake stood there with a bottle of wine in his hand and a warm smile on his face. "Hey," he said softly. "I brought this. I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I went with something safe." Emily smiled, her heart fluttering in her chest. "Thank you. It's perfect." He stepped inside, and for a moment, they both stood there in the doorway, simply taking each other in. The intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on Emily. It wasn't just the space they shared, it was the connection, the comfort they found in each other's presence. "You look beautiful," Jake said, his voice low, but sincere. His eyes softened as he looked at her, and for a brief moment, Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Thank you," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm just me, you know." Jake chuckled. "Well, I like that, me." He paused for a moment before adding, "This is nice. Just us." "It is," Emily agreed, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "It's good to have something normal. Just a simple evening." They moved to the kitchen, where they shared the task of preparing the meal. Jake was surprisingly skilled with cooking, and the two of them worked together with a natural rhythm, laughing and joking as they went along. It wasn't just about the food. It was about the connection, the way their personalities complemented each other, the way they could move through life's little moments without tension. As they sat down to eat, the conversation flowed easily between them. They spoke about their families, their childhoods, their dreams for the future. Emily found herself laughing more than she had in years, the heaviness of her past momentarily forgotten. "So, what's your big dream, Emily?" Jake asked, his eyes locking onto hers with genuine interest. "What do you want in life?" Emily paused for a moment, unsure of how to answer. She hadn't allowed herself to think about big dreams in a long time. After everything she'd been through, she had simply focused on surviving, on finding peace in the small things. But now, with Jake sitting across from her, the question felt different. "I don't know," she admitted, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "I used to have all these ideas, you know. Big plans. But after everything that happened, I kind of let those dreams fade. I've been living day to day." Jake's gaze softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "What if you could start dreaming again? What if you could let yourself want something big?" Emily looked up at him, surprised by the depth of his words. "I don't know if I can," she confessed. "I've been so focused on just surviving that I forgot how to really live." Jake's expression softened. "That's exactly why I'm here, Emily. To remind you that you're worth so much more than just surviving. You deserve to thrive." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. His words were so simple, but they cut straight to the heart of everything she had been hiding from. The truth was, she didn't know if she could allow herself to thrive. But hearing Jake say it made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, it was possible. "I want to believe that," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "You can," Jake said, his voice steady and full of conviction. "I believe in you. And I believe in us." They sat there in silence for a few moments, the only sound being the gentle hum of the night outside. The weight of the moment settled over them, and Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't perfect, and she didn't know where things would go from here. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where they sat on the couch, the flicker of the fireplace casting soft shadows across the room. They didn't need to say much. The comfort of each other's presence spoke volumes. Emily rested her head on Jake's shoulder, the warmth of his body soothing her. She could feel the tension in her muscles start to melt away, the tightness in her chest slowly releasing. She was exactly where she needed to be. Jake turned to her then, his voice quiet. "I don't want to rush anything, Emily. I just want to be here for you. Whenever you're ready, whenever you need me." Emily nodded, her heart full. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew she wasn't alone anymore. She had Jake, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could truly take the next step forward. "I'm ready," she whispered. "For whatever comes next." And in that moment, everything felt possible. The days following Emily and Jake's dinner felt like a turning point. The gentle comfort of their growing connection started to shift Emily's perspective on love and trust. The fear that had once held her in a tight grip loosened slightly, and for the first time in what felt like ages, she allowed herself to feel something other than the weight of her past. But life, it seemed, had other plans. It began with a phone call. It was a Saturday morning, the sun filtering through the curtains of Emily's cottage, casting warm light across the room. She was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and she hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Emily?" The voice on the other end was strained, full of urgency. She recognized it immediately, her mother. "Mom. What's wrong?" There was a pause, and then her mother's voice cracked. "It's your father. He's been in an accident." The words hung in the air, a sharp, cold reality sinking into Emily's chest. She barely heard the rest of what her mother was saying as panic clawed at her insides. Her father had been in poor health for years, but this felt different. This felt final. "Mom, where are you?" "I'll be there soon," Emily managed to say, her voice shaky but determined. "I'm at the hospital. I don't know what's going to happen, Emily. I'm coming. I'll be right there." The phone call ended, but the weight of it pressed heavily on Emily's heart. For a long moment, she stood there, frozen in place. The world outside seemed to blur, as though time had stopped moving. She didn't want to go. She didn't want to face the pain that was waiting for her. But deep down, she knew she had no choice. Family was family, no matter the history. The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity. Emily's mind raced with memories of her father, the man who had once been a pillar of strength in her life but had later become someone she barely recognized. His illness had taken a toll on their relationship, and she had distanced herself in ways that now felt like regret. She hadn't seen him in months, hadn't even spoken to him in weeks. The rift between them was still there, a painful reminder of everything that had gone wrong. When she finally arrived at the hospital, her mother was waiting in the lobby, her face pale and drawn. She looked so small, so fragile, and for the first time, Emily saw her as someone who needed her, not just as the person who had hurt her. "Mom," Emily said softly, rushing to her side. She wrapped her arms around her mother, holding her as though she were the one who needed comforting. "I don't know what to do, Emily. He's unconscious. The doctors are saying it doesn't look good." Tears stung Emily's eyes, but she fought them back. She had learned a long time ago that crying didn't solve anything, that it was better to just push through. But in this moment, everything felt overwhelming. The emotions she had pushed down for so long bubbled to the surface: fear, anger, regret. "I'll be here," Emily whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." They sat together for what felt like hours, the sterile smell of the hospital room filling the air as they waited for news. Finally, a doctor came in with a somber look on his face. "I'm afraid your father's condition is critical," the doctor said gently. "We're doing everything we can, but I'm afraid it's a waiting game now." Emily nodded, the words too sharp to process. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to face the possibility of losing her father, even if their relationship had been strained for so long. As Emily sat by her father's side that afternoon, she found herself lost in thought. The sterile environment of the hospital felt suffocating, and the beep of machines only added to the tension. She couldn't help but replay the years of their relationship in her mind, the love, the disappointment, the arguments. The anger that had built up between them was so deep that she couldn't even remember what had caused it in the first place. All she knew was that the man lying in the bed in front of her was still her father, for better or worse, and the time to mend their bond was slipping away. A knock at the door pulled Emily from her thoughts. She turned to see Jake standing in the doorway, his expression full of concern. He looked out of place in the hospital, like a man who had wandered into a foreign world, but the moment their eyes met, Emily felt a rush of relief. "Emily," Jake said softly, stepping into the room. "I'm here." She could barely speak, the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She simply nodded, grateful for his presence, as he walked over and sat beside her. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice low. "I didn't know." "Neither did I," Emily replied, her voice breaking slightly. "I wasn't prepared for this." Jake took her hand in his, a simple gesture that grounded her. "You don't have to go through this alone." "I don't know what to do," she said, her voice full of anguish. "I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I even want to." Jake's grip tightened on her hand. "It's okay not to know. You don't have to have all the answers right now. All you need to do is be here. Be with him. And be with yourself." Emily looked at him, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and guilt. She had spent so much of her life running from her past, from her family, and now, when it mattered most, she was faced with the consequences. But Jake's words reminded her that it wasn't about fixing everything immediately. It was about showing up, about allowing herself to feel whatever came. The rest of the day passed in a blur of doctor's visits and waiting. By evening, Emily's father was still hanging on, though his condition remained critical. Emily found herself sitting by his side for hours, talking to him, telling him things she had never said before. Things she had never thought to say. The words felt awkward at first, but eventually, they began to flow, honest, raw, and full of the regret she had been too afraid to express. "I don't know what's going to happen, Dad," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "But I'm here. I'm here." As night fell, Emily and Jake left the hospital together. The cool air outside was a stark contrast to the sterile warmth inside the building. As they walked toward her car, Emily leaned into Jake, letting him take the weight of her exhaustion, both physical and emotional. "I don't know what happens next," Emily said quietly, her voice heavy with uncertainty. "I don't know either," Jake replied. "But I'll be here. For whatever comes next." And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, Emily realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to have all the answers right away. She didn't have to fix everything. She just had to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Emily spent the night tossing and turning, the hospital's sterile walls still fresh in her mind. The quiet beep of machines and the faint smell of antiseptic had infiltrated her thoughts, keeping sleep at bay. Every time she closed her eyes, her father's frail face appeared before her, a stark reminder of the relationship they had lost. A relationship that, despite all her attempts to move on, was still tethered to her. By morning, Emily felt the weight of exhaustion settling over her. She barely registered the morning light that streamed through her bedroom window. The events of the previous day felt like a blur, and yet the emotions, fear, regret, guilt, clung to her like a heavy cloak. She hadn't been able to sleep much, and she hadn't eaten either. But none of that mattered right now. Her mind was too full of questions. Was this what she had been avoiding all these years? Was this why she'd kept her distance from her family, from her father? Because it was easier to keep the anger and the pain locked away than to face the mess of unresolved feelings? She grabbed her phone, checking for any messages. There were a few texts from Mia, checking in on her, and one from Jake. He had sent a simple message, "Thinking of you. Call me when you're ready." Emily hadn't spoken to Jake since the previous night at the hospital, and a part of her felt guilty for not keeping in touch. He had been there when she needed him most, but she hadn't even had the energy to talk about what was really going on. She couldn't keep pushing him away. Not this time. Taking a deep breath, she called him. "Hey," his voice answered on the first ring, calm and comforting. "Hi," Emily replied, her voice soft and tired. "I'm sorry I didn't call earlier. I didn't know what to say." "You don't have to apologize," Jake said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I'm just glad you reached out. How are you holding up?" Emily hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was holding up at all. "I don't know. It's hard to process everything. The last thing I expected was for him to be in an accident like this. It feels like it's all happening too fast. Like I didn't even get a chance to prepare for this moment. He wasn't even really part of my life anymore. And now it's too late." Jake's tone softened, and there was a pause before he responded. "It's never too late, Emily. Not really. You don't have to forgive him right away, or even at all. You can take your time. But don't let this moment pass without facing what you're feeling. You've spent so much of your life avoiding your past, and now it's coming back. But you can still control how you react to it." His words hit her like a tidal wave. She had avoided her father for so long, had built walls so high that now, when the opportunity to rebuild was here, she didn't know how to break them down. She had spent years pretending she was okay, telling herself she didn't need anyone, especially not her father. But now, with his life hanging in the balance, she realized just how much she had taken for granted. "Jake, I don't know if I can handle this. I don't even know how to go back and fix what's broken." "You don't have to fix it all at once," Jake replied, his voice steady and full of understanding. "But you do have to give yourself permission to feel. You can't bury it forever, Emily. Whatever comes next, you don't have to do it alone. I'm here, okay? Just take it one step at a time." His words felt like a lifeline in the sea of uncertainty she was drowning in. For a moment, Emily allowed herself to feel the smallest flicker of hope. Maybe she wasn't as alone in this as she had once thought. "I'm going to go to the hospital later today," Emily said softly. "I have to see him again." "I'll be here when you're ready," Jake said, his tone unshakable. "And when you're ready to talk, I'll listen." Emily hung up the phone, her chest tight with emotion. She had no idea what she was walking into today, but something inside her stirred. She couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the years of hurt and silence. But she could start with today. She could face the man who had once been her father, even if it was only for a brief moment, and see if there was anything left to salvage. By the time Emily arrived at the hospital, the weight of the day felt unbearable. She barely recognized the woman in the mirror, her face drawn and pale, her eyes tired and hollow. But she was here. She had made it this far. She walked through the sterile corridors of the hospital, the scent of antiseptic sharp in the air. Her steps echoed loudly in the empty hallways as she approached her father's room. She didn't know what she would say. She didn't know what she could say. But the time for running was over. Inside the room, her mother was sitting by her father's bedside, her hand resting gently on his. Emily paused for a moment in the doorway, watching the fragile scene. There was a quiet stillness in the room, the kind that only illness could bring. Her mother looked up when she heard the door open, her eyes red-rimmed from hours of crying. She stood up slowly, as if the effort was too much for her. "Emily," her mother whispered, her voice shaky. He hasn't woken up. The doctors, her voice faltered, and she struggled to find the right words. They don't think he'll make it through the night. The word struck Emily harder than she could have anticipated. Her father, the man who had been such a presence in her life, the man who had caused her so much pain, was slipping away. She had thought there would be time to fix things, time to have those conversations that had been left unsaid. But now, it seemed, there was nothing left but the silent space between them. She approached her father's bedside, her heart thumping in her chest. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and for a moment, Emily wasn't sure what to feel. Anger? Regret? Sadness? All of it, tangled and raw, flooded her at once. But what surprised her most was the overwhelming sense of loss. Despite everything, he was still her father. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking as she reached out and touched his cold hand. "I don't know what happened to us. I don't know how we got here. But I want you to know. I'm here. I'm here now." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry, not just for her father, but for everything that had been lost, for everything that could have been. For a brief moment, the world outside the room seemed to vanish. Emily sat there, holding his hand, whispering things she had never said before. The silence in the room wasn't just the absence of sound, it was a shared moment between them, something beyond the years of silence that had come before. Her father's chest rose and fell slowly, and as the minutes passed, Emily realized that maybe it wasn't too late to start healing. Maybe the pieces wouldn't ever fit perfectly again, but that didn't mean she couldn't try to put them together. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?